Hi everyone, welcome to our second podcast of Free Devs and a Maybe. The podcast which is aimed at complete novices. If you missed off...
That includes on podcast. Carry on, sorry.
Great disclaimer. Sorry. Yeah, this is a podcast for people who are just getting into web development. This is not for people who are already PHP gurus or perhaps co-wrote Facebook or anything like that. So if you're just looking to find a little bit more information on PHP, this is the podcast for you. So if you missed our first week, I did this podcast with three other guys, Fraser Hart, Ed Mann and Lewis Keynes, three extraordinarily good web developers. So,
thanks, Mike.
Hey guys, how was your week been?
Wow. I'll go first. Sorry.
Yeah. Epic weeks.
It's been very busy time of year. Down in Tunbridge Wells, coming up to Christmas and everything. I've had about 3 or 4 things on the go for the last week, so it's been busy, but all good. The weeks are flying by at the moment, so I can't complain.
Nice. Been working on an exciting project?
I'm working on one at the moment, actually. I'm building a website which tracks all of the domains that we host, which I think we'll send a link to the plugin thing that I found at the end of the show. Basically it's I've got to basically track all of the sites that we host and check when all the domains expire and all that. So been building a program that hopefully will do all that dynamically, because I've been having to do it manually so far. So it's an interesting challenge, but it's going all right.
Sounds good. I did check out that plugin that you recommended a few weeks ago, the Maps one.
Oh, the Google Maps, it's brilliant, isn't it?
That was a good find. That was really helpful, actually.
Yeah, for anyone out there that...
Show notes sorted for the first week, because I definitely want to check that out too. That's the link.
Show notes has been a problem. I don't know what's going on there. But we will have a website very shortly. I'm going to register the domain at some point, but it'll probably be freedevsandamaybe.com. And I have got my guy doing the design right now, so
brilliant.
We'll be able to put all the show notes on there soon. So
if anyone's listening to this actually might have intentions of buying that domain for us, then please don't.
I really didn't think of that.
Copyright.
I was
Keynes, F Hart, E Man, M Bud. 4th November 2013.
I'll just get forhotmen.com. I'm sure that's going.
Yeah. Okay.
One man who did have an exciting week, I know firsthand, is Fraser Hart, because I saw him in Leicester Square on Saturday night.
You certainly did. It's completely unrelated to web development. But Saturday through into Sunday, I was in Leicester Square doing a 24-hour rowathon, because in June next year I'm rowing from California to Hawaii, so we were basically out doing a 24-hour row in the heart of London, just trying to raise a bit of awareness, tell people what we're doing, and raise a bit of money for our little expedition.
That's awesome, man. You must have been knackered the next day.
I was, physically it wasn't as taxing as I was expecting it to be. The hard thing was the sleep deprivation, though, because we had a tent put up in the middle of Leicester Square, so obviously it's not the calmest place in the world to live and to spend the night, but so I had about an hour's sleep over the weekend. And more than made up for it last night. So I was asleep for about 12 hours by the time when I got home. And
nice.
So kind of struggled through, but completely unrelated to web development. It was good.
What's it? I've never stayed up all night before. What's that like?
Not great, to be honest. A little bit overrated.
But we should point out that you are looking for sponsorship, right?
Absolutely. We're trying to get hold of corporations that want to be involved in sponsoring our campaign. Basically, we're part of a race called the Great Pacific Race, and like I say, we're rowing from California to Hawaii, and it's the first ever race of its kind in that stretch of water. So, if there's any corporations or you personally want to donate to our campaign, then we'd be very much appreciative of any help. And our website is pacificrowers.com. There's a little self-plug in there.
Awesome.
And thank you, Mike, for the donation as well. Very much appreciated.
No worries, man.
I will as well. I will.
Yes, I will too. +1 on that.
Demonstrate.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go hard, Zed?
Split quid, yeah. What?
Yeah. Can I borrow 50p?
How about you, Ed, the player man? What have you been up to this week?
Just many girls.
Many types.
Many languages.
Yeah.
In time. Immutable state, you know what I'm saying?
How about the cooking? How's the cooking going?
The cooking's going brilliant. Yeah, I did a roast yesterday. I mean, what more can you say, you know? haven't picked up. Well, it
I'm
was
impressed.
Meals, for like many a year, and then let's do a roast.
2 weeks ago, you couldn't boil an egg, and now you're doing a roast.
I know how to dominate an egg. That's all I can say.
There's a caption.
And that is a very funny. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, I probably won't repeat that to our viewers, listeners. Yeah.
We're on YouTube now. Yeah. How about you, Michael Bag? How was your week?
My week has been not too bad. I can't really complain. Kind of just busy at work, doing the whole Java thing on the side, trying to help a couple of guys with Java on the side as well, which has been fun.
Yeah, how was that?
It's really tough because some of these guys have never seen code in their lives, and it's pretty quite relevant for this actually. But if you've never seen code before in your life, it's really intimidating. But it's like half the battle is in the mind, isn't it? So it's just trying to
doing Java and not something like PHP, because you start with PHP. So was it easier? Do you think it would have been easier for them to just start with PHP than go into Java?
It's really difficult to say, but I actually think Java is easier to start off with, because to me it makes a lot more sense that all these things you have to specify the data type. I like that. It makes it very clear that this is a number, this is a string. With PHP you can just be so lazy with that, can't you? But maybe that makes it easier. I don't know. But certainly with Java as well, when you start out with the programming side, it's just all code. Whereas when you're doing the web and you're getting into the styling and everything, there's a lot more to learn all at once. Where with Java, if you're just starting out, it's great just to learn the logic of programming. But like I say, I have learned PHP first, so it's hard to tell which I would have found easier. Going back, if I knew nothing, it would be interesting to see which came easier. So,
right, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because I'm obviously more PHP than anything else. So I've never really even looked at Java.
Yeah.
So what would you kind of say Java is used more for than PHP?
Well,
what would you say that you use it for more?
The guys that I know who do it, professionally, it tends to be banking. Seems to be like the go-to language for banking. But
okay.
I mean, it's tricky now, isn't it? Because everybody wants some sort of web presence. So, it's so much easier to use something like PHP. But I guess back in the day, Java was great for, building desktop applications, that kind of stuff. So from a practical side of things, I don't know actually what I'll use it for, if I'm being honest. But I just love playing with it. It's just, I don't know, a really good, fun language to learn in my opinion. And like you say, you've not done Java before, but you would pick it up so easy because of your knowledge of PHP, and especially if object oriented PHP, Java will look so similar to you. I mean, the syntax is practically identical.
Yeah.
So it's like I say, if you've learned PHP, you can pick up Java dead quick. And
it's just definitely a very highly sought after skill, isn't it? When you look at job adverts and stuff like that, there's a lot of Java developers that are being looked for.
You know what I mean? The thing is, I've had this conversation with you guys before several times, but I get the feeling sometimes, we say, I'm a PHP developer, we don't get the respect that we deserve. Whereas, you say, I'm a Java developer, I think, I don't know, that people automatically get a bit of kudos for that, which is, to me, is illogical.
Last one. Completely agree with that.
Yeah. Maybe PHP 10 years ago or something.
I love it. Bring it on.
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of articles recently that say PHP is a poorly written language, but I don't really know what.
It's meant to be. It was just a couple of script servers. That's what's lovely about it. It's a never-growing language.
Yeah, I guess you could say some of the consistencies or inconsistencies with PHP, we always talk about some of the functions. This is probably going a bit too far now, but talking about the needle and the haystack, which we get passing first, and that changes. But Java is like that as well. The other day, for people who've not done any programming, with Java, you have certain what we call methods that return certain things, and some things that you have with arrays, you'll have something that returns the size of that array. So we know that we've got 10 items in this collection, and you'll get different Java classes that have different terms for that. So you'll have one that says length and one that says size. So I can't imagine there's any language that's perfect, that its naming conventions are completely
designed by committee, isn't it? Designed by committee, and the committee is always different what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. So But anyone sort of played with any decent plugins this week? Anything new or anything they think's worth a mention?
The class that I've been using for my Whois script is very good, but I'm still working on that one, so I'll probably give you more information on it the next time, I think.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
What about you, Fraser?
For me, but I've been using a date time picker, which is an add-on to the standard date picker for jQuery UIs. It's been really useful just for the project I've been working on at the moment. It's just a simple little bit of functionality, but it adds on the facility for a time picker onto the date picker. So I'd recommend that, and I'll chuck that in the show notes. But yeah, apart from that, it's just been a fairly standard week work-wise for me. Firing away on the same project I was talking about last week, which is the kind of the web end to a app builder for an iPhone app. That's just been submitted to the App Store. I can't really talk about it too much at the moment until it goes out. But once it's out, I'll talk a bit more. But yeah, it's been fairly standard.
Nice. It sounds like quite a long-term project, that one, maybe.
It is. Yeah, it's kind of like a business that is an offshoot of the company that I work for. So it's it's certainly been a taxing one anyway.
Nice. What about you, Ed, man? Anything new you've discovered?
Not so much. I have found a couple of articles which have hashtag with 3 devs pod of pick, which is professional. But no, not really anything interesting plugin wise.
Oh, I'll tell you what I did see, guys. phpjs.org, I think it is.
Oh, you tweeted that, and I tweeted that like a month ago, I swear, because it is.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh, man. Sorry about that.
PHPJS.
No, it is awesome. No, that is awesome. Good find again, sir.
It looks almost a little bit lazy, like it's like, well, I can't be bothered to learn the equivalent way of doing it in JavaScript, so I'll just use this.
No, I don't need a prototypical language. I want PHP everywhere.
Nice.
Seriously? That's crazy.
Yeah, it was really useful because I just needed to get something done quick, and I think the particular function I was looking for was like rtrim or something like that, and I was like, I can't be bothered to write this all out myself. And I just did like equivalent rtrim JS in Google, and it just came up with this library. It was.
Well, so someone's taken all those functions and converted them to JavaScript?
Yeah, I don't know if he's done them all or how many he's done, but yeah, definitely like all the core ones are in there. It's a real kind of time saver for me. So.
Oh, I might have to have a cheeky look at that.
Yeah, definitely well worth a look. So, we are going to have a look at, in this week, that's pretty mixed up English, we're going to look at the very, very basics now of getting started with PHP. I think we sort of discussed some of the concepts and, how to get into PHP the other week, but now we're going to look at some of the nitty-gritty, but only at a very basic level. We don't want to confuse any of our listeners at this time, so don't be afraid. This is going to be very, very sort of basic. But one of the things I guess we did touch on very slightly last week was setting up a local environment. I think I told you guys the story. Like, I had no idea of local environments when I started out, and I literally, the first thing I did, I think, was spent 200 quid on hosting, which was regrettable. But there's so many tools out there now. I guess we should have a talk about them now. I guess who wants to start off? If someone want to talk about, who's more Windows? We got any Windows guys here?
I was a dev environment on Windows before. I tried to set one up back when I was working on classic ASP for a project that I was working on. And to be honest, I can't even remember the process, and it's irrelevant anyway because it's a Windows environment rather than a PHP environment. So in terms of doing it on a Windows machine, I'm completely unqualified to talk. I'm trying to get my mouth closed.
I can talk about that.
Go for it.
Yeah, well, I was using Windows all the way up until probably the beginning of this year in my current job, where now they all use Mac. So I now should point out I'm a Mac convert,
Yay.
And definitely recommend that over Windows. To be honest, I don't know if you guys agree with that.
Hell yeah.
But however, if you have obviously already spent the money on a PC, there are two main sort of local servers that I found. One was called WAMP, and the other one was called XAMP. I think XAMP, if you Google it, I think you can get the download from, I think it's called ApacheFriends.org or something like that. Ed will know. Is that it, Ed?
We lost.
Apache.
I know that I am. Yes, I think it is.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's probably not the one I'd recommend. Yeah, apacherounds.org. What I would recommend if you're on Windows is to look up WAMP, just because the configuration of it is so much easier, and everything there is more accessible than with XAMPP. With XAMPP, there's a bit more. There's a few more kind of screens you have to go to get to where you want to set up all your configuration. But with WAMP, it's nice and easy. So yeah, I mean, the basic installation process is literally just Google WAMP, and I think the download site is wampserver.com. In fact, yes, it is here. Rather than explaining how to download it, there's a million tutorials on YouTube. As I said last time, there's anything you really need to learn you can find on YouTube or by just Googling it. So all the information's there. Download WAMP, get it all configured on your computer, and that's it. You're pretty much away to go.
Is there any obvious difference between XAMPP and WAMP?
Just the thing with me that made the most difference is literally once it's open, you can right click on it and you've just got easy access to restart your Apache server and get into your PHP INI and stuff like that. Whereas with sorry,
the extensions as well, I think in WAMP.
Yeah, definitely. Whereas with XAMPP, you open up more of a control panel where you've then got to navigate through some other bits. So it just made it a lot quicker for me when I found WAMP, and I found the performance of it a lot better as well. So that would be my recommendation. And then for Mac, obviously MAMP, which I think is the main one. I think you can get WAMP and some of the other ones on Mac, but MAMP's generally the most used one, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. It's what I used before. It was brilliant, but I guess the point of all these is they're all doing the same thing. They're creating what we call a LAMP environment, and again, this was another sort of terminology that I had no idea about when I was first looking for web development jobs, and I kept seeing these jobs saying understanding of LAMP, and I literally didn't apply for a lot of jobs because I was like, well, I have no idea about LAMP. You know, I didn't know if it was like a different programming language or what. I had no idea. But maybe Ed Mann could go through what LAMP is.
So LAMP is it's just Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So it is really all it's like, let's just be cool and make LAMP because LAMP's funny, and WAMP and MAMP. Let's just be funny with it, and get it to what we want. And all we want is Apache because we want a web server. We want MySQL because we want a database, and we want PHP because we want a language that actually does anything with these things. So no, there really is nothing special about it. But as you say, no, you're right, because a lot of job, like adverts and stuff, they whip out WAMP, LAMP, and MAMP and stuff, and they just it can definitely think, well, hang on a minute, that looks like another language. I mean, PHP, PHP. It doesn't sound, it's exactly the same, so it does sound like a language.
But essentially what these tools do, for anyone who doesn't have a clue, is basically you can then open up a web browser and you'll get a specific address to go to, but it's usually, like, I don't know, localhost /8080, and then you can see your PHP in action. So you don't have to FTP it up to your £200 hosting account that you've just paid for. You can literally just do it in your own local browser.
Which you feel good about, you're online. You definitely need that for.
It felt like when I joined that gym and then went once in a year.
Quitting so hard.
Yeah, it was that kind of feeling. Pretty painful. But these tools, they're really quite user friendly, I'd say. I mean, I think for anyone who you download it, it's fairly self-explanatory, and usually you'll. Depending on that process.
WAMP is particularly it's very straightforward.
Yeah.
And it's nice, obviously, that you've got the GUI SQL clients built in and all that stuff, like PHP MyAdmin to help you work with your databases and whatever. I mean, you can learn raw SQL as well and just work with it like that if you want. But generally, with SQL, you need something like PHP MyAdmin or SQL Pro to make databases a lot more easier to work with. Definitely. I think.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. Yeah, but it's a great tool, and usually you've got like it's pretty obvious. You have a folder called htdocs or public HTML, and you just put all your code in there, and it reads from that folder, and you're up and away. It really is quite simple. But I guess us guys talking about it in a podcast doesn't make it sound that simple. So we'll try and find some resources and put it in our show notes afterwards, I guess. So. this kind of really brings us on to what to do now. You've got this local environment, what to do, and I think this is the bit where we were going to talk about some of the very basics and what you can do. I guess one of the simple things that most people do of any language when they're first getting started is a Helloworld script, which when you first start out is quite satisfying, I guess. But all you do to have a Helloworld script is an opening PHP tag and what we call echo, which is just a function that just spits out text, whatever you give it. So that's probably the very first page you want to build. And we should probably just discuss, I want to call them primitive types, but things like integers and booleans and what they do. So, I don't know, who fancies talking about some of the data types and stuff with PHP?
It's a deadly silence.
Car crash podcast.
I'll jump in.
It's difficult when we can't all see each other. And
yeah, of course, yeah.
I'll jump in and do a couple. So I'll do integer. That's basically a whole number, which is basically it's. I don't know. I was about to say single-digit number, but it's not a single-digit number. It can be basically anything from 1 to 322 or 56. Ed? You'll know the upper limit. I probably should know this, but
oh God, no, mate, no way. There's the upper limit. It's like
Yes.
It's a million. It's like 32 something or other.
Okay, so you can go 1 up to 32 something or other, 32 million something, or 32 million characters, or I don't know. It's a big number. It's not really worth worrying about.
It's
use it for something like number of cows or number of parrots or number of tomatoes, rather than £1.56. So it is your whole numbers. So anything with a decimal, it wouldn't be an integer. It would be an integer if you were counting something, or if it was a certain number of something. If it was always going to be a whole number.
Yeah. So I guess probably one of the things we should mention is that how we use this data types to communicate with each other and add variables together and stuff like that. So a variable is something that we assign a value to, and then we can refer back to that later in the script. So we might have a variable called person or person name, and that person name equals Ed, or it might be equals 5. I don't know why that'd be a person's name, but you can assign a value to that variable that you can then reference further in your script. And the idea with these variables is that you don't want to be writing out the same things over and over again. If you can, you want to keep it dynamic and be able to reuse your code as much as possible. So, but
they're placeholders, pretty much, aren't they? They're just places to put content that you have.
Thanks for bailing me out there, because I was getting a right mess. But so you could have a variable that equals 10 and a variable equals 12, and then you can then add those variables together
and make another variable that is maybe C, a variable C for maybe the A and B that equals whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, I think, this would be a good time to kind of bring in the don't repeat yourself concept, which is obviously very important with programming, and that's one of the main reasons variables are used, obviously. So if from an early stage programming websites, if you can get to a situation where you're not reusing the same code over and over, the quicker you can kind of get into those habits, the better. And it'll really benefit you with speed and everything in the long term, because when it comes to upgrading or changing something on a website, you then obviously the better you've coded it in the first place, the less changes you need to make to have a bigger difference.
100%. And you know what, even this week I've been working on code that's probably been built by developers who've been in the business for 4 or 5 years, and they've literally got 10 lines of code at the top and then repeated those 10 lines of code 20 lines down, and it's just so painful. But
that makes you feel a little bit weird, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you always have to bear in mind someone else might be working with your code one day. So
and you don't want them to
you can make
you don't want to think cuss words at you when they're starting to use your code.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one thing is learning PHP. We don't want to get bogged down in it, but if you start learning good principles straight off, it will serve you so well when you get a job as a web developer or whatever you want to do. Get the core principles down now, like Lewis says with the dry principle, don't repeat yourself. if you do that straight away, then you'll make life a lot easier for yourself later. And one of the ways, obviously, you can do that is by creating functions, but we'll come on to that in a little bit. So probably still got some of the other basic stuff to look at, which I guess another important type for us with PHP would be a Boolean. Who would want to field that one?
I'll do that. It's nice and easy. It's just true or false.
True or
yes
false?
or no. That's it. Nice and simple.
Can you give us a example of when you might want to do that? Like,
yeah. So no, it's pretty much so it's like validation maybe. Like you want to just check some input, and you just want like and you have an if statement which we haven't got onto yet, but you just say, look, hey, if this validation is true, then please insert it into the database maybe, and it's just the true or false.
Yeah.
Is somebody logged in?
I guess it's more definitely with Java. You get lots of different data types. You really get bogged down with it, and it's very, very specific. With PHP, I guess we've probably covered the main ones, sort of strings and integers. And
so you got strings, integers, booleans, and then just floats or doubles, which is just as Fraser was saying, like £2 or 2 dot, and then another a frac on it, so £2.50 or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you've got a good concept of those, you could build quite a basic website at this point. Obviously, we've not touched on, and we won't just yet, on interacting with a database. But just with that, with PHP, with just those basic data types, you can start printing out information and just familiarise yourself with those concepts, I guess. So I think once you've got a gist of those, one of the things that you then have to move on to is conditional statements. And
that's where the fun starts. That's where the programming actually starts, where you actually can let the computer do what you want it to do.
That's the crux of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because we don't want to. We want the experience for one user to be different to the other. We don't want to greet Joe Blogs with a different name. We want to give them like a specific name or something like that. We might want to say, well, if they're, I have to care where I go here, but if they're over 18 years old, then maybe display them this content. If they're not, display them this other content.
Yeah.
That's a really bad example. But if conditional statements allow us to do that, and I guess the very basic one is the if statement. Anyone fancy fielding that?
Is it my turn?
I think it is.
Louise.
Yeah. Basically the three main conditionals there. You've got an if statement, an if-else statement, and a switch statement. I guess we could go with Mike's naming analogy. So say we've got Ed and Dave. So basically, you would use a conditional to basically test the state of your code at that particular moment in time. So if person 1 is Ed, do this, or else do something else. So it's always checking to see a particular state of the code at that particular moment. The if-else is very, very similar. It's probably the one I use the least out of all of those, but it's kind of say you've got Ed and you've got Kim, and it can only be Ed or Kim. Then basically you could say if person is Ed, else if person is Kim. Test to see if it's either of those conditionals, and if it's neither of those, then you would put the else on the end as a kind of a default to that. And then switch statement, which is one of the ones I use the most. Say each person gets assigned a different permission for a login or something like that. You'll have an array of names, which arrays we'll come on to in a moment, but say we've got Mike, Fraser, Lewis and Ed, all cast under the variable name of person or something like that. So you'd have a switch statement with person at the start of it, and then you have a case and a break. So you would list the cases for each person. So case Lewis, do this, and then break to get out of the switch statement. Case Fraser, do this. Case Ed, do this. That's good for when you're testing quite a few things at the same time, I would say. Probably the one I use the most, I would say, out of those. Does that make sense? Is there anything I need to
I thought that was pretty good.
For that?
I guess, I thought that was really good. I guess one of the things we should say is we were talking about the Boolean and true or false values. Basically, that's what the if statement is doing. It's saying, well, if this evaluates to true, so it's exactly the same as if we put if 2 equals 2. Or if 2 equals 2. It's just checking to see whatever is inside of those parentheses is true. If it's true, then you'll operate what's in between your two square brackets. And again, I appreciate that it's going to be really hard to understand this listening to a podcast, so we will, try and back this up with some resources to have a look. But that's essentially what we're doing. Sorry, Lou, did you just mention about the switch statement?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I was just looking at the barrage of abuse that was coming through Skype, so I got a bit distracted.
That was basically where you have a scenario where there could be sort of more than one outcome, whereas you might just use an if or an if else for that, saying a switch statement, and saying there's a case for each one, and then you would go off to whichever part of the code from there, depending on what was passed in.
Absolutely.
Very useful for front-end controllers. So that definitely is further on, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad our listeners can't actually see what's going on in the Skype message window. Yeah. So I think that's a pretty good wrap-up of if statements and how they work. And I guess a slightly more complex subject, and I guess we are moving through quite fast, but like I say, we will back these up with resources and stuff, but it's a really good idea to get familiar with the idea of an array, what they are, how we use them, why they're important. Anyone fancy taking that?
I think it's Fraser's turn.
Yeah,
I think Fraser's
definitely due. Yeah.
Right, so I'm talking about arrays, yeah?
Arrays indeed.
Yeah.
I was a bit distracted there, but yes. So an array it acts as a variable, so you can assign values to it. The thing that's special about an array is that you can assign multiple values. So you can have, say, you had price of apples, and if you say you had 3 different types of apples, you could have 3 items in there. So you could have price of apples 1, price of apples 2, price of apples 3.5. So you'd have £1, £2, and £3.50. And then you could then access those values in the array by referencing their position in there. So you could have my apples in square brackets. You could have 0, which would bring back the first item. And the important thing to know is that they're 0-based arrays. So even though you've got 3 items in there, it's basically listed as 0, 1, 2. So your array size would be 3, but it would start at 0. So your highest number would always be 2. And then as well as normal arrays we've just talked about, we've also got these things called associative arrays. These allow you to assign key value pairs, as we call them. So your key is basically the title, and then the value is obviously the value that you want to store. So say we were storing the details of people along with their age. We could say my user Ed 25. So we could refer to Ed as 25, and then say we've got Michael in there as well. We could have my user Michael, and then the value for that could be 32, and then we'd have my user Lewis and 31, for instance. And then you can then go on to refer to those values in the array. So instead of using my users 0 and my users 1 and my users 2 to get those ages, actually do my users Michael, and then I'll bring back 32, and then my users Lewis, which will bring back 31. And it's just a lot more intuitive way of working with values when you know what is actually contained within that array.
Nice. Pretty
concisely explained there, Fraser.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Well, I thought that.
Yeah, and I guess with both those arrays, we can do a loop on those. So I think Fraser was saying about how you could reference an array item or something in the array by doing array square bracket 0 or square brackets 1. But we might have an instance where we want to actually go through every single item in that array. There could be multiple purposes for that. Maybe we want to print out a table of all users so the user can see how many members we've got in a table or something like that. Or maybe we might be storing a load of objects in there, so we can then call a method on that object. Or the possibilities are endless and probably beyond the scope of this podcast. But the idea is, with any programming languages, there's always a requirement to have a collection. You're always going to have that, whether it's listing products in a shop, listing members in a database. There's always going to be that requirement. And these loops that we're talking about, the while loop, the for loop, the for each loop, all the languages I've come across so far have this in them. I can't remember back to classic ASP what the syntax is, but they definitely have them, right? I remember the while loop and
there is, there's, I think there's, is it while not?
Oh, yeah.
Do
While not.
Do while, yeah. Wow.
I'll stop move next loop. that was like for like 3 years.
Yeah. But you're always going to have this. If you're a web developer and you're building professional websites, you're always going to have a requirement to store things in a collection. And as part of that, you'll need a way of looping through them and accessing them. So these are really big concepts for web development. Once you've got these concepts, you've mastered a lot of it. There's not a lot you can't do once you've mastered these if conditions and these sort of looping through arrays. It's such a core part of the language, I would say. I guess the one that really always is quite different is the for loop, because of the way that you're going through. You're not doing an action for every one of the array. You're actually determining how long that for loop goes on for. Lewis, do you want to talk about a for loop and how that works?
There's only really one time that I tend to use that, and that's if I'm making a page where I'm going to be displaying like a number of images. So say like I know I'm going to be having 3 rows of 3 images. I will basically create a for loop, and outside the for loop, you need to know how many you're starting from, how many you're incrementing or decrementing the loop by each time, and then the maximum number, so that it knows the number of times to go through that loop. So in that situation, I would declare a variable perhaps called count outside of the for loop, which would be set to 1 as its opening value, and then inside the for loop conditional inside the parentheses, I would say for count equals 1 and then semicolon. Count is less than or equal to 9, and then another semicolon, and then count plus plus. And that's literally all I need to do. And then whatever I put inside of that loop is going to repeat itself 9 times. So then I would just put some sort of basic HTML style to whatever container size the images are going to be within that for loop. So that's pretty much the main time that I use it to save myself manually repeating sort of HTML code for things like that. So
yeah,
that's obviously there's many other uses for it, but that's one practical use for it that I have.
Pretty solid explanation there, or description. No worries. I guess one of the things that people listening to this now will be thinking, well, we've just discussed 3 loops, essentially, the while loop, the for loop, and the for each loop. Although I guess we didn't really go into the for each loop too much. Ed, do you want to tackle that one?
I'll happily take that, because that is actually quite easy.
It's the easiest one, right?
It is the easiest one, because all the for each loop is I'm just going to iterate over every single object. That's pretty much it. Say you've got a bunch of users, 0 index maybe Fraser, up till 2 index maybe Lewis or Kim, and you just for each loop over it, and you say for each one of these I want to do this, and you just get the object back, or the instance back of what you've got. Absolutely,
but this raises the point, that we just talked about these 3 loops, and for the users who've never used them before, it's like, well, why is the 3? Which one do I use?
That is a lose-lose situation there, because a while loop, you could actually do everything with the while loop that you could do with the for loop. No, sorry, the other way around. Sorry, you could do everything with the for loop. The for loop is just a fancy while loop, really. It
gives you that benefit of having the incrementer, the index.
Yeah, it has that the syntactic sugar, really, which is that it just looks prettier. The fact that it's all in one line, you can understand it, and many people from many languages can understand, the basic idea of where things are. Because a while loop, you could do the same, because a while loop just needs the condition to when am I going to loop through, because it's just the go-to pretty much if I go back up here and do this again.
Yeah.
But it is tough. Normally, with a while loop is normally for something where you're not arrays. Normally, you will chuck in with a for. A for, if you want to know where their index is, such as which was Lewis was talking about, which was the idea of like, I need to know where the last item image say is, or the first item is, or something. Or maybe you've got a mod on there where you need to know every so many items I need to put a line in, etc. A while loop is probably useful the most where you're actually probably inputting information, where I need to know, look, while this person still is inputting information, ask them what they want, etc., etc. And then the for each loop is just a nice, easy way to just say, look, hey, I just want to go through every single item in this array or iterator.
Yeah, so basically, those are your basic loops there. And the final part of PHP that we're probably going to discuss today is PHP Functions. And functions are very, very useful. The sooner you can get onto using these, the better. I mentioned earlier on about saving yourself the need to write code repeatedly. This is where functions come in very, very handy. PHP itself provides a fair few sort of functions for you to use, such as the date function, where you can literally just pass in some values to that and it will convert it to certain date types. You can also use functions like include and then pass in a page, and then you can include another page in the current page that you're using. And yeah, there are many others that you can discover, and you will discover the more and more you work with PHP. And yeah, so you can basically, there's two things that you can do with functions. You can either pass in parameters or pass in no parameters at all. For example, so what you might have a portion of code which is going to crop up at all parts throughout your site. It doesn't need to be dynamic because it's always going to be the same, such as maybe like a copyright statement. So you might want to put that in the footer of your website as well in various divs. So what you would do is you would create the syntax function my copyright, for example, with my copyright being the name of the function. Open and close bracket, open and close parenthesis, and then in there you would echo whatever your copyright was, for example. And then whenever you wanted to refer to that in your text, you would just, in your website, you would just literally write the name of the function with open and close brackets, and then a semicolon, and then that would repeat whatever's inside that function wherever you need it in the code. So that's if you're not going to use parameters. More often than not, when you create a function, you will use parameters because that's what you need to make them dynamic. And a basic example of that would be like an add function. So function add with maybe two parameters inside it. So inside of the brackets, you'll have value 1, comma, value 2. And then, so if that function's called add, inside of there, you would have maybe a variable called result equals value 1 plus value 2. And then underneath, you could either echo that value, so it would print to the screen, which is probably not recommended, or you could return that value, so you can actually get a value that you can work with in your code elsewhere. So yeah, they're basically then to call that, you would anywhere in your code you wanted to use that function, you would call add and then pass in whatever you want. So 3 and 1, and then that would return 4. So that's your basic examples, and it has a million uses.
That's a great explanation, and I think it, like you say, you mentioned this point a few times, but it really worth hammering home is that if you want to be a good developer and you want to have a good reputation, you want to be the guy that's producing the clean code, that the guy next to you just looks at your code and he's like, I understand completely what that's doing, and they can understand it and read it really easy. And if you do that, then you do a good job as a developer. And
you get respect of your peers there, and that's what you want. Yeah, absolutely agree.
Absolutely. And I speak to people all the time, and the guy that I work with at the moment, he's spent a lot of time working on some old legacy code, and he's literally just going through and just chopping out huge chunks of code that are just used over and over again, and just putting everything into functions.
Dry
and the Boy Scouts rule.
What is the Scouts rule? That is actually a very good thing you taught me.
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
I buy it now as much as I can.
So the Boy Scouts rule is where you never leave the campsite in more of a mess than when you got there. So when you're going into legacy code, if you see something that's not right, rather than think, oh, well, I'll just leave it might be working, I'll just leave it, you actually do the responsible thing and tidy it up. So it might be...
Don't want to compound the mess. Don't want to compound the mess at all.
Exactly. And, the other analogy that I've heard people use is like the whole, graffiti at a bus station. The councils, they want to get that tidied up as soon as possible, because if not, then people think it's acceptable, and the next bus stop gets graffiti.
I like that. I really do. That is very good.
Exactly. So the idea is that bad code breeds bad code. So you want to be the developer who builds his reputation on cleaning up code and producing clean, responsible code.
Because if everyone sees you doing, the right thing, they're going to do the right thing.
Exactly. You want to be the guy that, is leading the way and inspiring the other people how to do it. So that is the Boy Scout rule.
Well, I like that. I like that a lot.
It was worth mentioning now when we're talking about functions, because, functions definitely a good way of doing that. I guess one thing that we should talk about, and to be honest with you, this kind of confuses me, and I probably get bogged down with it, and, the reality is actually it doesn't really matter, but it's certainly in in the object orientation sort of way. I mean, how do we differentiate between a function and a method? I mean, can we say literally that the function inside of a class blueprint that makes it a method, or?
Oh, it's tough. Functions, methods. You normally class a method which is inside an object. So Helloworld, you have your objects and then you have your methods. A method is a function. A function is something that just produces a result.
Yeah.
So I would suppose you could generalize everything as a function, which is something that is a repeatable bit of code where, like as Lewis was saying with the add, you have A and B or value 1 and value 2, and you just return a result. A method you normally class as being something that is inside an object, where maybe you have an object which is user, and then you have a method inside there, maybe add, which is add a user, or something that's along those lines.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought, but it's worth sort of clearing up, I guess. So, and we haven't really touched OO yet anyway, so it's probably not really worth thinking about at this stage. But yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground actually today on the very basics of PHP, and like I know Lewis was saying before the podcast that it's very hard to explain this stuff just through audio. You really have to get your teeth into the code, and we'll hopefully give some good examples if we can find some links. But I guess at the end of the day, places like W3 Schools, like we say, will show you how to do a lot of these things, all of them probably. So, but I think if people get the concepts and understand everything we've talked about today, then you've gone a long way to becoming a good developer, I guess. So.
I think in terms of compounding what we're trying to say to people as well, I think that the best thing for anyone who's trying to learn code to the best thing they could ever do is actually just get your hands dirty and start coding, and then if you'll come across problems that you need to find solutions to, and when you come across those problems, you'll naturally have to come into some of the stuff that we're talking about, and then absolutely the best way of learning is by doing it yourself. So I'd say to anyone, get a goal in mind. If there's any kind of an application you want to put together, or any kind of a website you want to put together, start working on it even from the ground up. So even with whatever limited knowledge you may have now, keep working and start banging code out, and then once you get to the hurdles, then you'll automatically be drawn to these things that we're going to be talking about, and yeah, it's just honestly the best way of learning. Yeah,
absolutely. And everything we talked about today, you will have to do at some point or another. It will just come naturally. You'll have a requirement to do that. I mean, the idea of using a programming language is that it makes things easier for you. You don't want to have to write out a paragraph every time for if you're listing out a user. It's so much nicer if you can do something in a loop, so you're just echoing it out every time that you iterate through a collection. But yeah, I mean, these things all come up naturally at some point. So hopefully that just explains some of the concepts and some of the ideas behind why we use collections and functions and all the other stuff. So, but like I say, worth just looking at a lot of the resources, and we'll hopefully put some stuff in the show notes. So that probably covers us for this week, unless anyone else thinks they've got anything that they'd like to add to that. Or
just find us on what's our Twitter handle? 3 devs capital D and a maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we with, as in the number 3, the integer 3, if you will, to hark back to earlier in the show.
Absolutely, and we will hopefully have a website soon, but we'll keep you posted on that front. But yeah, and anyone who does download the podcast, if you could review it, that'd be awesome. Perhaps not this week, but future podcasts.
Oh, this week definitely.
But
we're legit people.
Yeah, there's probably going to be about 20 minutes left after I've edited all the all the 18 stuff. But yeah, absolutely. But we really would like some feedback, so that'd be good. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back hopefully within the next couple of weeks.
Hey Mike, let's fade the music back in to end the show.
Oh, hello. All right.
Let's do this.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Hey.
Love ya. Rock and roll.
Okay.
Oh, I'm gonna do it.